Well, folks, thanks for joining us again today to Stockwell Day-to-day news. More and more people joining every day. We appreciate that. And thanks for the viewers and the listeners coming in from the United States because, as we know, we try and take a look at the major items of the day and some of the implications behind those stories that you won't get from mainstream media. Big news, of course, today in Canada is the federal budget is being tabled. You will probably see that coming out in a matter of hours, depending on what time you're watching this. One of the things that the Prime Minister is saying is this is going to be generational investment. Generational investment. That's to give it a positive spin. That also means generational increased debt. Anytime the government is talking about increased spending, you can guarantee there's going to be increased deficits and increased debt, and that will go on for generations. And the problem is that accumulates from one year to the next, one decade, and one generation to another. And as we looked at this topic yesterday, we talked about the fact that a country, and this is including Canada, can pile up so much debt that the people, the bondholders, and the places where nations go to borrow money, they will keep raising the interest rate on the money that they're lending to the government because as debt increases, then risk increases. So we are headed, unfortunately, for increased debt, which is going to mean increased upward pressure for taxes on business and people. And that's going to mean businesses that are looking around that can be mobile these days. We need to keep this in mind. Mobility for business, but also mobility for individual entrepreneurs. More and more, of course, it goes without saying, people can work from their homes anywhere in the world, and people will move to the places where there's lower taxation. Now, it's interesting, you'll see internationally when this is discussed, people from government representatives and people from the World Economic Forum and the United Nations, they say this is a terrible thing that people would actually leave a jurisdiction where they're being paid, where they have to pay high taxes and move to a jurisdiction where there's lower taxes. Somehow this is seen as a great travesty of some kind of justice. Well, I can tell you that when I was Minister of Finance in the province of Alberta, we prided ourselves on the fact that we would keep taxes down in spite of the fact that we had no sales tax, and even when oil prices were disastrously low. That is what will attract not only business and investment, but it will encourage people to be entrepreneurial and know that all their taxes, all their hard-earned money is not being taxed away. So very concerned to hear about generational investment. It means generational increase in debt. And none of the programs that we call entitlement programs will be looked at. There will be some savings. You're going to see savings talked about. It might even be in the millions, maybe even the billions. But those savings will be outstripped by the increased spending in other areas, and nothing on looking at how we can deliver so-called social or entitlement programs better. The only time that that's ever been addressed, actually in this generation, was when Stephen Harper was Prime Minister, Jim Flaherty was the Minister of Finance, and they looked at saving because they were very honest in saying, look, the budget for ongoing retirement is severely under strain and will collapse if it doesn't either get funding or if it isn't adjusted somehow. So we didn't want to cut back the monthly or annual amount that a person was getting. That money is needed. We wanted to continue to see it raise, as a matter of fact, with the cost of living. But what Stephen Harper did was move the date out at before which you could start collecting. So what they said was, and this was in the mid-2000s, instead of collecting at the age of 65, we're going to gradually move that out to the age of 67. People are younger, people are working harder, or people are working longer, and people are healthier. And the savings over time is in the billions and billions of dollars. And it was introduced in such a way that somebody who is like 1 year away from retirement wasn't going to be punished. It was done with several years ahead before anybody would even start to notice the impact. But the impact on preserving the budget for seniors was profound and very positive. that was put in place. There was no opposition. In a significant way, people didn't rush onto the streets. People understood that this was a way of preserving long-term the seniors' budgets and seniors' pensions, because people are healthier and living way longer. When people would, a couple generations ago, maybe only be collecting till the age of 70 or 73. Now people are easily living into their 80s and even 90s. And it all went well. And for no reason at all, other than straight vote pandering, one of the most careless things that I've ever seen in a budget process, after Justin Trudeau got elected as Prime Minister, a year or two after, he just canceled that program. He rolled it back to people being able to start collect when they were 65 and not in the projected years at 67. There'd been no protest. Everything was fine. And that particular that particular account for senior citizens was being preserved for decades to come. And for no reason at all, other than pandering for a few votes, Justin Trudeau rolled that back and was never held to account for it. Media never held him to account either. So something to keep in mind as we look at, when you hear that term, generational investment, you got to think generational debt. Other thing one of the number of things you're going to see with the budget, of course, is major projects, and they're speeding those up. Something that a number of us have been saying for years and years, that the amount of time to get approval for either a major, never mind just a major project, how about people in their homes in municipalities? Municipalities are arguably the worst in terms of increasing the regulatory regime and delaying the time it gets to get permits. But focused on the federal budget today, on the amount of projects that are going ahead, especially those that are designated billions and billions and billions for First Nations. Those are great projects. They'll produce jobs. They'll produce positive byproducts. And there's a complaint, it's being talked about in CBC today, about some of the First Nations saying they weren't given enough time to talk about it, the consultation process. Look, two things can be true at once. You can always have more time. We could always use more time to analyze things. The other thing the federal government has to be very careful of is there is a duty to consult, and to consult carefully. That duty has in past years been dragged out, taking years and years to get full approval. So two things need to happen. The government's got to be very sure that they are consulting properly. And First Nations folk have to realize, first of all, on the budget itself, on this particular item where there was complaint, budgets by law, as a matter of fact, you can't release figures about the budget that are material. That means significantly large figures before the budget comes out, because it could affect what people are going to do or purchase or buy. And so you have to wait until the budget comes out. So there's a corresponding duty on both sides. You can drag out consultation too far, but you can also move it too quickly. And I encourage First Nations to consider those. The other thing that needs to be considered, and this is something that we hear a lot, especially through our subsidized media in Canada. You see it the same in the United States. But our national media will always go to the negative stories when it comes to First Nations. Now, there's a lot to be concerned about on First Nations issue. There's no denying that. But many times, and even when I would appear on CPC, I would raise the issue that they always focus on First Nations community or certain First Nation bands that were having difficulty, even great difficulty. But there are many very significant success stories coming out from First Nations bands that have leadership, chiefs and council that are very business-minded, that know that investment is needed and that you can properly construct things and move things along so that projects can actually accrue benefits to their First Nations community. The success stories, the many success stories about highly successful First Nations communities being involved in business and business ventures, there's a lot of those out there. Our national media, our subsidized media, don't like to talk about those. It's always got to be end of the world. It's always got to be doom and gloom when it comes to First Nations. There are stories and situations to be concerned about related to First Nations. There's no question about it. But you need to also give hope by talking about the wonderful First Nations groups that are really moving ahead aggressively and they're going to be the winners in the long run. Well, I don't want to be entirely mean or just constantly talking about subsidized media, though it's an important issue. Anytime a government subsidizes media, you know the media is always going to be softer. You're always kinder to the hand that feeds you. But I want to give CBC a kudo here because they published a story today about Cuba, and it's in relation to the fact that, as we know, many countries, we have people from those countries who get special visas. They're allowed to work in Canada. And related to Cuba, they're one of the major operations where there's collaboration with a Canadian company. The Canadian company is called Sherritt International, and it's a huge conglomerate mining company, a pretty successful one, and fertilizers and minerals and everything else. And they have a joint venture with a Cuban company, which of course would be the government of Cuba. So we have Cuban workers working in Canada, special visas, because of this collaborative property. They also have, Sherritt is also working with Cuba Sherritt in other countries on mutual investments. And what's being reported is something that has been going on for a long time. A number of us has been talking about the employees, the Cuban employees working for the communist government of Cuba, get their wages literally expropriated by the Cuban government. So it might look like they're making good money here, but the wages get expropriated at a terrible level, and it gets them down to about the level they'd be making if they were working in Cuba, which in many cases is about $3 a day. So my criticism in the past related to our federal government, the Liberal government, has always been soft on Cuba, never daring to criticize Cuba, never daring to criticize its former dictator, Castro, whom I met and had an interesting conversation with. We'll talk about that some other time. But here we have a situation where the CBC is actually reporting on the terrible things the communist government in Cuba does to their employees. As a matter of fact, there was just a case recently related to Cuban doctors working in Jamaica. So much of their wages were being confiscated by the Cuban government that the courts there ruled that this was actually a case of slave labor. So the Cuban communist government, as some of us have been saying for a long time, is actually performing the equivalent of slave labor on their own citizens. Something needs to be done about it. And when you get CBC for one of the rare times criticizing what's supposed to be the socialist dream of Cuba, it's a rare thing. And so we should acknowledge that, and something needs to be done. I've been to Cuba, been there on an agricultural mission, private sector. We went in with a group of farmers and we were showing people how to raise certain crops, how to raise chickens, how to raise a certain amount of livestock, and it was very successful. But we really saw firsthand the abject poverty in Cuba is criminal. It's even more criminal than the lack of reporting that goes on about it, because mainstream media hates to ever be negative about any socialist government and the way they inflict pain and poverty on people. So kudo to the CBC. And for those of you who, I talked to some individuals who are upset with the U.S. on the tariff thing, and I understand that. I don't like tariffs myself, but they're so upset, and they thought, well, we know how we're going to fight back on Trump. We're going to cancel our annual trip to Hawaii, and that'll show them, that'll teach them a lesson. I've said, well, where are you going to go? They said, well, we're going to go to Cuba, we think. And I said, you're going to cancel your trip to Hawaii, where you would be giving money to a local owner of a bed and breakfast there. You're going to deprive that family of that revenue stream, and you're going to take and give your money to a communist government in Cuba. Wow, that's a really smart way to punch back at the Americans. Give some thought to some of these things, folks. We're entering winter season, of course, and so prepare yourselves, put on a seatbelt, because now you're going to get all the horrifying reports about the worst storms ever seen since the creation of the world. Now listen, all areas, especially if you're talking Canada or in the U.S. on the seaboard, we all get nasty weather. We always have. So the first reports have come in. First big storm in Nova Scotia. I lived there as a kid. I spent a lot of time there. You get storms there. But is this a storm coming in? No, it's called, brace yourself for it, a weather bomb. A weather bomb is about to explode on Nova Scotia. Get prepared, Lord, folks, for not hearing about a storm, but hearing about weather bombs, and of course, what we used to see and call an Arctic front, which, yeah, that's what happens in the winter in Canada. Be prepared for those. It's not an Arctic front, it's a polar vortex. The polar vortex is going to be sucking life out of us with the freezing temperature. A lot of this is because most mainstream media are caught up in the extremes of environmentalism, and so this helps to undergird the fact that they believe the world is coming to an end, and storms are indicative of that. So that's where you see a lot of the hyperbole when it comes to reporting on storms. And a lot of it is just the fact that it's revenue generating to report like that. And you say, how is that revenue generating? Well, when you turn the television on, turn on your device, look at your iPhone, and you hear there's a weather bomb coming. And usually they say it's not the day of the weather bomb. It's usually 2 or 3 days out. It's like hurricanes. They'll usually let you know, and they should be reporting on hurricanes, but it's with great clamor. It's usually days ahead. So you're going to watch. And that's eyes on screens, and eyes on screens get measured. And that's what the media companies then take to the advertisers and say, look how many millions of views we got at 9 a.m. today on our weather channel. And so you can get the advertising that goes with that. You can convince advertisers that's a good one to weigh in on. So 2 things driving weather. First of all, there is real weather and there are real problems, but the exaggeration of those, and some even call it weather porn because it's raised to such an extent and with such clamor and with such anxiety that people can't turn the stations off, can't take their eyes away from it, and that's increased revenues. So brace yourself, folks, for those weather bombs. There's a bit of a bomb going to go off in a political way, and I'm saying that carefully. I don't want to be accused of everything, but the explosive situation coming with the mayoralty race, which is today. Keep your eyes on this. It's today in New York City. And of course, Zoran Mandami, a lot of people are still saying, well, who's that? He's raised in a wealthy home with raised in privilege. His parents are extremely, let's say, blessed by the woke universities where they attend and the other things that they get involved in with taxpayer help. So here you have Zoran Mandami, extreme socialist, and I can say that everybody is an extreme socialist, wants to take over distribution and production in New York City, which is going to be a living disaster if that happens, as has happened in every, these are communistic economic principles. I'm not saying that in any way as a scare tactic. It just is. He's talked about it very openly. It looks like he's about to win. So the irony here you've got New York City is still regarded probably as the financial capital of the world, and you've got the most severe anti-business, anti-entrepreneur, anti-innovation, severely communistic, strong Islamist supportive individual about to become mayor. Now, that possibly could have been stopped, and it may not happen, but once you watch the polls, watch your screens today, because Andrew Cuomo, a former governor of New York, is running against him. Now, he's got his own baggage in the past that's not really helping him, but there's another person who is center-right. His name is Curtis Sliwa, and he's been on the scene in New York. He's quite well known, actually, a radio show and a very well-known character in New York. Between the two of them, their 2 votes could possibly stop this upstart communist, Zoran Mandami, from winning. They could possibly. And a number of other candidates who were center or center-right dropped out of the race because they wanted to see the vote consolidate if there was any chance to stop this disaster whose name is Mandami. And unfortunately, Curtis will not step down unless he's done something in the hour or 2 before this podcast, but it's voting day today. So unfortunately, there's a very strong chance we're going to see one of the most intense socialists ever elected in the U.S. That's going to have an effect. Positive effect will be people in Florida, people in Texas, and other places are going to benefit because there will be mass exodus of individuals, technicians, people who make good salaries in any way, shape, or form, and businesses will be leaving New York City. It will become even more poverty stricken. We feel badly for the people of New York City, but as is said, one person defined democracy, H.L. Mencken, way back in the 30s, by saying democracy is that process where you vote for something you want, and then you wind up getting it good and hard. So we feel badly for the people of New York City. Dick Cheney died today. Dick Cheney, former vice president of the United States, and through his tenure and his time, he got a lot of criticism on various issues. I'll just say this. I had to deal with him when I was a cabinet minister in the Harper government, deal with him on some security and border issues. And here's what I found. As with anybody you're negotiating with in the U.S., they're always tough. It's always America first, period. If it's not of benefit to the U.S., the chances are it ain't going to happen. And when I dealt with him on that basis. He was very straightforward, very tough. And so I had to bring to the table showing where clearly it would be a benefit to the U.S. if they would do the thing that we were asking. As it turned out on that particular issue, we can talk more about it some other day. It did work out. So I don't know, you hear lots of stories about Dick Cheney, but I found him open, tough, forthright, and convincible if you're willing to put the cards on the table, stop the silly insults, and just get down to business. And we got some things accomplished. Well, on the culture front, as you know, you're probably aware, the last several years of this maybe decade or two, a couple of decades, when it comes to culture, when it comes to a lot of things in terms of how we conduct our lives, minimalism was sort of the word of the day. Whether it was the type of furniture you have in your home or your office, the look, the clothes you would wear, things were minimalist, showing people are taking very practical effects to life in itself and not wanting to be overly burdened. That has clearly shifted in the last couple of years, and we're into an era they're now calling maximalism, and you see it in the choice of clothes people are wearing, especially when you look at women's fashion, especially both young, the Gen Zs, Gen Alpha, and older women, clothes that are, let's say, in many cases, not all, but bulkier clothes that have many accessories to them. You see this in men's clothing to a degree. And as you look at just walking through the grocery stores, look at some of the design magazines for homes, you will see rooms that have living rooms or dens piled up, lots of cushions, lots of stuffed looking furniture, beautiful tables and beautiful cabinets. We're into the age of maximalism, and people are saying, sociologists are saying, it's because there's such a sense of losing our identity because everything the way on the internet the way it is, and we're all focused on our screens. It's a way of making a statement that we're not getting lost, that we're not going to be replaced by AI. It's sort of this unconscious effort. So enjoy your maximalism. And closing out with the thought on something that especially young girls are more and more getting involved in, and certainly young women. It's a certain type of surgery, a certain type of plastic surgery. Now, I know it's probably running through some of your minds, but I'm going to tell you what it is, and I'm going to be challenged on how I pronounce this. It's blepharoplasty. Blepharoplasty. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but what it is, it's where they do the surgeries here on the eyelids to raise your eyelids. Now, many people as they age, like myself and others, the eyelids begin to droop somewhat. And so for years, people have going in, seniors and others, going in and you get part of those, just the eyelids lifted. It's a little bit painful, I'm told. I haven't had it done. But the trend, and I think there's somewhat of a concern to it, going to younger and younger. So young girls, girls in their teens, early 20s, beautiful eyes, but they've moved from, sort of the heavy mascara look, which has always been a bit of a mystery to me, and why you got most people's eyes, just the eyes themselves. The Bible tells us the eyes are like the light of the body, and most people's eyes are quite beautiful. And so what we see is this trend moving from plastering them with black or all different kinds of colors. Now, very young girls going in for this surgery. And they're saying, the sociologists are saying, part of it is because they're so much effect on selfies and on making videos. Now they're seeing themselves really, really close up, and they're getting hyper aware of that, hyper conscious, and it's leading to this. So absolutely, people are free to do that. But for the girls or the women in your life, your wife, your daughters, your partner, your granddaughters, reassure them. They have beautiful eyes, and they can feel good about themselves. Keep your eye out for that. Enjoy your day. Talk to you tomorrow.